put it into words. Sometimes we're not answering just a single question, but we are actually coming up with multiple suggestions. The whole thing about Reader's Advisory services, even though it might make the staff members feel uncomfortable or nervous or a sense of pressure to know a lot about books and reading and readers, the thing is, we want these people to come to the library. We want them to feel welcomed in our library, to get what it is will meet their reading interest and needs. So the next time that they are looking for in a similar situation, they will come back to the library. And so if they become regular users of our library, then chances are they are going to talk about it out in the community, and that brings others to the library. And of course, more users means more titles get circulated, and we just become more relevant to what is going on in the community. Okay, so today what we are going to do, we're going to talk about kind of some background and preparation for the Reader's Advisory in terms of making our customers feel welcomed. We're going to talk about the Reader's Advisory interview, which is a dialogue between the library staff member and the patron. And then we are going to talk about making how you come up with making suggestions, and then what you should do as a follow-up. So the first section we're going to talk about here is the approach. And by approach, I mean, what do we do to create an atmosphere that encourages people to come up and ask when they need assistance? So the first thing I want to call to your attention is this idea of an inviting atmosphere. And that is sort of looking at the physical environment. Now, I know most of you didn't have a say-so in, your library building, or, where the furniture came from, or the lighting or things. But there are things that we can do, and things that we should periodically do a checklist on to make sure that we aren't creating obstacles where there don't need to be any. For example, I think a lot of us don't think a lot about what goes on outside the building. Look at your parking lot. Is it easy to enter and exit? Are the entrances and exits clearly marked? What's the condition of your parking lot? Someone like me who has mobility issues, you certainly don't want me to fall and hurt myself. Do you have appropriate signage? Is it large enough to be read? Do you need speed bumps in order to get traffic to slow down? What about your book drop? Do you have an outside book drop? Can people get to it without getting out of their cars? Can they at least get in and out quickly if they have to walk into your building to get to the drop box? What does your grounds look like? Is there something designated for entertainment, like if you have a music or an outside event? Do you have room for something that would be pleasant to look at, like a butterfly garden, or maybe a piece of sculpture that would invite somebody to sit and enjoy the sculpture while reading outside? Are there shaded areas where people could sit outside and read or eat, like maybe at a picnic table? Does somebody regularly have grounds duty to go around and do things like pull weeds, put out new mulch, and pick up the litter. So kind of systematically going through every part, both outside and inside. Look at your entryways. Look at your lobby areas. Look at the traffic flow within your building. Look at the areas where the customer first sees when they come into your building. Is the main desk clearly marked and easily found by all age levels? Are the checkout stations distinct and uncluttered? Are there too many decorations? Too many visual clues that are distracting? Is there good lighting? Are there bright colors? Are the materials to be shelved or on hold? Are they, if they're visible, are they done in an organized manner? Are the work areas for the staff out of view to customers? Is your staff visible behind the main desk? Do they stay turned around to the front so they can be easily seen by the customers? Or do they kind of keep their heads down like trying to show that they're too busy to help someone? All right, so these are some of the things that you can do in order to make sure your library is an inviting atmosphere. Okay, so here comes audience participation. All right, so look at the two graphics on the slide. We have the top one, which is a lobby in a public library in Arizona. And then we have another public library, I believe this was either in Canada or England. Okay, which would you say is more inviting? The one with the tree or the one with the clock? You can chat in down at the bottom. Which would you say is more inviting? Okay, if you said tree, give yourself a pat on the back.
Yay!
And I think, again, it's the idea of kind of creating something that draws the person in. I'm sure the library in the bottom picture is probably older, a smaller building, but the fact that everything just seems kind of so crammed together right where people come in might have a tendency to make them feel a little claustrophobic. Okay. Didn't trick you on that one. Okay, what about this one? This is the same room. In one of the pictures, the room was redesigned. Which do you think would be more inviting for teens, top or bottom? Right, the bottom is more inviting. I think the top one kind of looks more like a classroom. I think with the money you can see that they painted the walls a bright color. They used some of the same furniture, but you see got the activity tables are out with things on it. Maybe a makerspace table over there against the wall. Have this bright bulletin board for display. So I think that's kind of what we're saying, is that a little bit of paint and a little bit of arranging of furniture can go a long way towards being more inviting. Okay, here's 3. This is the last one we'll do on this section. Okay, so on the left we have a reading room and a big picture window. So we'll say that's on the left. So we have top right, and then we have another teen room or children's reading room, bottom right. Okay, so which do you think would be most appealing to probably tweens or teens? Left top right, bottom right. All right, if you said top right, give yourself a pat on the back. You did good. Actually, the picture on the left and the picture at the top is the same space. The picture on the left is what it looked like before they remodeled. And what they changed it to is what's on the top. So you can see they kind of changed the style of furniture, arranged the setting a little bit different, added some bright colors on the sides there. So the window isn't enough to draw visual interest. You've got to go a little bit beyond that. And I guess the main problem with the one on the bottom right is that it looks too much like a classroom. And, so it's missing kind of that decorative attempts which the one at the top did. Okay, so I think you kind of get the picture here. I guess that was kind of fun, wasn't it? Another part of the inviting atmosphere is to make sure you use effective signage. So clear signage and labeling, helps the customer, especially the one who wants to be independent, and gives them a chance to find what they're looking for first. So libraries have lots of different kinds of signs. Signs can indicate the location of a certain part of your collection. It can highlight databases or the computer area. It gives you signs can be used to promote readers' advisory services and where to go if they need staff assistance. So library signs are living documents in that once you put them up, you can't forget about them. Things change, staff changes, so really for a very large library, and into a smaller degree, even small libraries, there needs to be a systematic evaluation of those signs and see whether they are still needed, whether they need to be updated. Excuse me. So the signage needs to be consistent, preferably being of the same size and of the same color scheme. Signs need to be permanent. They need to be done in a professional way. So in my research, what I found out was that signs should never be handwritten in your library. That if there's an emergency situation where you don't have time to type up a sign, then use a handwritten sign, but remove it as quickly as possible, certainly within a day or two. Lettering, use the same typeface that's easy to read from a distance. When printing signs, always use both upper and lowercase letters because that's easier to read. Usually for coloring, use white letters on a dark background. That's more clear and more easily visible. Try to use consistent colors within the same departments of your library. So maybe you'd use one color scheme for signs in the children's area, maybe a different color for signs in reference, another color for your adult collection. Try to use standardized size and shapes, and that will help the patron figure out the different kinds of signs at a quick glance. And I always suggest that you use your library brand on your signs so that your signs have a recognized look and feel. So whatever, it might be a logo, a tagline, a graphic, whatever it is you're using to represent your library, that should also be on your signs. Okay, so in general, less is more. Avoid visual clutter. The more signs that exist in an area, the more people tend to forget them. So for every sign you want to put up, think about if there are other signs that should come down, or how you might could combine several signs into one. Keep your wording concise. If you need something that's going to take a lot of in-depth wording, keep it to areas where people would wait, like in the lobby. Grouping information is better than long sentences or paragraphs. Use words if using arrows or other kind of pointers would be confusing. Do not use library jargon. Nobody's going to know it but you. And when possible, use pictures and graphics together with words, especially in the children's section of your library. Conduct staff training so that everybody knows what the rules are about making signs. And again, make sure you institute an evaluation process so that signs can be evaluated in terms of their relevancy and reliability. Okay, here is audience participation time again. Okay, so your answer is going to be good or bad. Okay, so here's an example of signs in a library. So based on what we said about signage, are these good signs or bad signs? All right, these are examples of bad signs. These came from a university library. So these signs are poor design, too much text. Nobody's going to stand there and take the time to stop and read every word while they're passing through. Okay. Here's your next example. Good or bad? Okay, well, I'm offering this as an example of good. In terms of what we saw before, I mean, certainly if you were passing through this floor, this would catch your attention. So if you needed to know what floor you were on, that huge 3 would certainly let you know that you are on the 3rd floor. And what they've done is they've color-coded the collection Dewey Decimal Sign to the colors associated with that floor. And then also they have the building directory so they can see whether they need to go up or down. So there may be still some problems with this, but by and large, I'm saying that this is good. Okay. Good or bad? Now, so you want to think, would this be easy for patrons to see? Is there anything about it that's confusing? Would it make somebody feel welcome? Okay, so I'm showing this as an example of a bad sign, or certainly one that maybe is a little bit confusing. this again was from a college library. But notice all of these are kind of one right after the other, and they're kind of all spelling out some regulations of using the library. But because all of these, you've got some that are regulatory, but then you've got one that's directional in terms of pointing out where the restrooms are, kind of hidden in the middle. What was discovered is that most people tended to ignore a collection of signs like these as visual clutter, and so they didn't pay attention. This Okay, I was reading my notes here. So this was in a college library, and these signs like these were placed on every column in the library. And again, because people got used to just noticing them, and they never stopped to look to read them. The other thing too is sometimes the terminology is inconsistent. Like one says quiet environment, but then down at the bottom it says the exact same thing but uses different words, like silent zone. You don't need both. And so sometimes that can be confusing, and overall it's just kind of no. Which maybe college students can get beyond that. Okay, here's a foyer or lobby heading into a public library. So what do you think about the signs there? Good or bad? So we kind of have a mixed reaction. Some are saying good and some are saying bad. I think overall it's a pleasant impression when you walk in. The experts said this was a bad example. And the reason why they said it was bad is look where the directional signs are. They're way up high. Now, chances are when you walk into the building, you're not going to look up at the ceiling in order to read the signs. So that makes them hard to notice, hard to read, and it said if the signs were down more at eye level, that would have been better. And that, I think, is exactly what the library did to judge that. Okay, so, there are a lot of examples of good and bad, but we're going to move on, because we've got more questions coming up. Okay, so when looking at environment, you want to look at your displays and any other helpful aids that you may have out on your counter. You want to make sure all your display areas are well stocked. You want to make sure that your arrangement of materials are accessible to all customers. If you make book lists, bookmarks, if you have newsletters, you want to make sure that these are put on the counter or in areas where patrons sit or wait, and so it gives them an idea that the library is interested in what the reader might be wanting to check out. Displays and things like bookmarks and newsletters gives a chance for the staff to promote what they are reading. It kind of humanizes your library staff and remind visitors that they too are passionate readers. So some ways to create effective displays: put your displays in high profile areas where there's good lighting. Have the display at the right height for the patrons, so like in children's display area might be a little bit lower than what you would have in the adults. Make frequent changes to smaller display areas. Keep it fresh. Make sure your patrons know that they're allowed to borrow or reserve items that are on the display. And if you can, use art or other work from your patrons in order to add interest and encourage involvement with your library. The last part of creating a right approach is a welcoming staff. As the patrons enter the library, your staff should be there to greet them and make them feel comfortable. Staff should acknowledge customers with welcoming body language. Now, if you're there frowning, with your arms across your chest, no smile, trust me, I wouldn't want to come ask you a question. So when there are customers coming in the library, coming up to the desk, and staff should stop all their other activities and focus their attention on that patron and what is needed. Yeah, I know, we're all busy, there are always things to do, but nevertheless, we have to have an open mind, we need to be polite, and when we're approached, we need to give the customer the proper respect and attention they deserve. When we are helping a patron, we need to make sure that we look at them and make eye contact before we hop onto the computer screen. I'm a bad one, when somebody is starting asking for something and I hear where they're headed, I immediately start, typing on the keyboard thinking, oh, I'm going to save time for them, where they won't have to wait. But, it really, isn't the right way to show that you're interested in them, even though you might be doing it for good reasons. As your library circulates within the library, they should be aware of customers, and without being intrusive, just go up and say, are you finding what you were looking for, or can I help you find something? And then based on the answer, either offer assistance or, just move on. But this does open a door for potential conversation where the person might get help they need for something that they are looking for. Because remember, a lot of the patrons come in are reluctant to ask for our help. Your staff members should somehow wear a name tag or some kind of ask me button that indicates that they are staff and therefore are eligible to provide assistance if needed. So again, welcoming tone, not feeling rushed. This is what we should do in terms of our customers. Okay. Here's one more picture for you. Okay, we've got 4 pictures of librarians. Okay, which one would you say is displaying the most welcoming attitude? You can go top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. I say, y'all are either really smart or my questions are really easy. Yeah, I think the guy on the bottom left is probably the most approachable. Of course, we've got the stereotypical, librarian with the glasses and the telling everybody to be quiet. I'm sure the stormtrooper there from Star Wars was probably, for some kind of children's program or maybe a Halloween. But, for young children, that could be kind of scary if he's at the front desk. And of course, the girl peeking out between the piles of books goes to the whole thing about keeping your area free of clutter. Okay. So once we know we have an inviting and welcoming atmosphere, then we turn to the actual conversation or the reader's advisory interview. So the whole purpose of the interview is to get into a conversation with the patron and to gather information about their interest so that you can make suggestions and make those in a neutral and non-judgmental way. Now, sometimes when people come up to the desk, they aren't exactly sure what it is they're looking for, or may not have the words or the proper words to ask for it. So sometimes you kind of have to get the conversation started. And so what you can do is use some of the questions that you see here on your slide. The whole idea is to engage in a dialogue with them using open-ended questions. Now, open-ended questions are those questions that cannot be answered with just a yes or no. It kind of forces them to put into words the things that would answer your question, and then you use those as clues towards what they're looking for. So here you can see the kinds of questions. What have you read before that you like? What did you like about it? What were you looking for today? I think that kind of, are you looking for a book, a DVD, downloadable, audio book? You can use that to get to different formats. But again, the idea is to do something other than ask a question other than a yes or no question. Of course, involved in that is once you ask your question, you have to listen to what they answer, because the clues to what you can use to come up with suggestions is going to be included in that conversation or in their answers. Remember, sometimes you may need to ask follow-up questions, especially for a word like, well, I want a good mystery. Well, good can mean many different things. A good mystery to me might be one that is a police procedural, whereas a good mystery for Alicia, my partner today, might be a cozy mystery. So very different, but they're both mysteries. So you may have to ask clarifying questions. So the questions that you're asking when you're listening to answers, you're looking for those appeal terms. Now, I'm not spending a lot of my time today talking about appeal terms in Reader's Advisory. If this is unfamiliar to you, we have recorded webinars on our website, or there are many things out on the web that you can turn to that would explain this to you. There's a whole section on that in Novelist. So I'm not going to go through that today, but just know that those are the words that you're looking for. In terms of what's really important, look for body language clues in your patron. The expression on their eyes. Do they make eye contact? Have they kind of opened up their arms in a welcoming suggestion, or are they still kind of closed off to what you're saying? So again, no matter how busy you are, you got to set your work aside and give your customer your full attention and really pay attention. Okay, here's my first example. Okay, so I just read The Kite Runner. I really liked reading about pre-war Afghanistan, and I want to find a book that's like that. Okay, so that's the background. Of course, as the library staff member, you don't know that part. So I'm coming up to the counter and I'm saying, I'm looking for a good book that describes life in Afghanistan. So as a librarian, what kind of follow-up question would you ask me in order to figure out what it is about Afghanistan I want to find a book on? what would be your follow-up question? So I want a book about life in Afghanistan. Ooh, I like Becky's question. Are you looking for a story set in Afghanistan or a nonfiction book? That's really good. Have you read any other books on Afghanistan? I think that would be good, especially if you were familiar or read books in that same area enough that you would recognize some other titles. That might give you a sense of, whether he's looking at modern day Afghanistan, maybe something about the war efforts in Afghanistan, or if he's looking for something back of a historical nature or beyond pre-war day. But evidently, in just what he says here, we can see that setting in this instance is the appeal factor that is important to this customer. And so we have to give that the proper attention. I don't know. I think most of our examples are considered to be from adults. So this would be an adult person rather than a child. Okay. So some general rules about the reference interview. It's okay to be nervous. Again, nobody expects you to know every book that's ever been published or every title that's been, bought and placed on a shelf in your library. Nobody's that good except Mrs. Sibley in my high school library. The idea is for you to suggest titles rather than to recommend things that you yourself have liked. Keep in mind that you can suggest more than one title. You can suggest things in a variety of formats. If the customer wants to leave with something in their hand, then you should be the person to put that book in the person's hand. So, if you're directing them to where the titles they are interested in are in the library, you need to walk with them to that location rather than just kind of point them in the right way. And never, 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 ever, never, never, never stop asking questions. The questions are where you get your clues that you can use to get them what they need. So what if they want something that you don't know anything about? Well, again, no one expects you to have read everything. Don't lie and say that you know all about it when you don't. If you have heard something or read a review or seen something about it on TV, you can mention that. But, you can't just leave it at that. You don't promise them anything, but you still need to go through the process and the tools that you have at your command in order to help them leave with the title that day. You can make your suggestions. You can give them permission not to take anything that you pull out for them. They're not, obligated to read anything that you pull for them. Again, just keep your mind clued in to what goes in and out of your library and what's considered to be hot from different media. And just remember, in situations like this, you do have tools that you can rely on. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through these because we have done other webinars recently on these. Your online catalog may be of help to you, especially if your catalogers tend to use appeal factors in their notes fields in the cataloging record. Novelist Wayfar is the best reader's advisory tool for all ages. If your library is a member of the Kentucky Virtual Library, then you have access to Novelist as part of the virtual library databases. Of course, Amazon and other book sites like this, have their own reader's advisory reviews have number of book lists, bookmarks lists that you make yourself based on hot topics or things of interest. Uh, if you're in a large enough library, you talk to your colleagues. You'd be lucky if all of you read a different genre. And then if you, like, I'm not a big nonfiction reader, but if Alicia here was a big nonfiction reader and a customer came up and I didn't feel I could help them and she was available, then I might ask her to step in. And there are lots of places out on the internet that you can go to for reviews, award winners, and so on. Okay, I'm going to skip this one for right now, and let's go on to the next part of our process, which is to offer our suggestions. So when you've finished the conversation, then it's time to take action. So you want to come up with a suggested list of titles or authors that the patron might be interested in. So, but don't, overwhelm them. 3 to 5 is a good number. Try a variety of formats. If you are having to go on to Novelist or something, then, tell them that it's going to take just a minute, but, when you come back, you will have some specific suggestions for them. And that way, they know that you're working on their request. Use a balance of computer screen, and if you know the collection well enough, just walk to that section and pull a few books off the shelf that they might be interested in. While they're looking at things that you've pulled off the shelf, you could use that, while they're looking at those, you could use that time to go back to the computer and, like, say, work on Novelist. So once you've given them some suggestions and they have some books to look through, then you need to close out the interview and follow up. So in order to get feedback, what you need to do is, after they've had a chance to look at the things that you've recommended or have suggested, then you should go back to them and say, are you happy with any of those? Do you want me to look for some others? If in the meantime you were still looking for other information, you found something different or something that you hadn't mentioned before, you can mention it to them at that time. So again, let the person know, that they're not required to check everything out. They're not required to read it just because you suggested it. If they are happy and they are ready to move on, then certainly end out the conversation with an invitation to come back to the library and to let you know how that worked out for them. So in the short term, they left with something that they've checked out. But in the long term, they'll come back and hopefully work on that relationship you have started with them. Because the whole point of Reader's Advisory is to make that connection with your patrons. To make a connection so they know that your library is a welcoming place, that it's important, where they can come, feel welcome, and are encouraged to talk about what they are looking for. Reader's Advisory is something that should be ongoing, and at the end of each conversation, make sure you always invite them to come back. Okay, so what we are going to do now is I am going to bring up the link to the little video I asked you to watch. So when I click on this, it's going to send you to the clip, and if it doesn't start automatically, you will have to start it yourself. It's about 1 minute and 40 seconds long, and when you're done, X out of YouTube, and you should be back into our training. And I'm crossing my fingers that this works.
Which desk staff dreads the most?
No, I didn't know that. I'm sorry.
Well, have you looked at the bestseller list?
No.
Did you look in the fantasy section?
No. Where's that?
It's over there, behind the copy machine. Take a right, then a left, then 2 more rights, then straight ahead. You cannot miss it.
Hi. I'm back.
What now?
Sorry to bother you again, but I couldn't find the fantasy books.
Figures. It's my break time soon, so let's make this quick. I'm reading Judge Sonia Sotomayor's autobiography. It's pretty good. Why not try that one?
Well, my favorite book is The Hobbit. Do you think I'd like your book?
Who knows? Don't you think it's worth a try? It's #1 on the bestseller list.
Okay, so click on the red X on your video screen and you should be back in the training. Okay, so the clip was an example of what not to do in a reader's advisory interview. Okay, question number 1. A librarian's attitude towards reader's advisory should be, what's the best answer, A, B, or C? Now this is the right way to do it. So you want something opposite of what we just saw. Okay, the correct answer is B. Reader's advisory can make you nervous, but you should be open-minded. So B is the correct answer. Question number 2. The librarian's suggestion should be based on A, the patron's reading interest, the librarian's favorite titles, or C, only high-quality genres. Correct answer is A. It's all about the patron. Question number 3. When indicating where a book may be found in the library, a librarian should A, provide a map, tell the patron to follow the signs, or C, walk with the patron. Ding, ding, ding. Correct answer is C. Okay, last one. During the reader's advisory interview, the librarian should A, indicate judgment over the patron's choice of genres, tell the patron it's too late in the day for help, or C, show respect. Correct answer is C, show respect. Okay. So we're just about finished, which is good because we're just about out of time. Just want to remind you that if you do need help, the State Library